The United States Air Force is the finest Air Force in the world, right? What if I told you that the United States Air Force has never been so small, the aircraft so old, its readiness so scarce, and its training so poor?
Aircraft were younger in past eras, and we had more of them. Can't ask airmen and guardians to continue to do more with less and less anymore.
I am not making these claims lightly. I have been following the Air Force for decades now, and I spent thousands of hours of my life studying its technology, operations, composition, and so on. While I can't deny the late technology developments, if we look at the big picture, there is a lot to do. I am Gas. Welcome to Millennium 7. I have a degree in aeronautical engineering, I served in the Italian Air Force, and I briefly worked in the aerospace industry. But most of all, I am a massive aerospace nerd. As such, you simply can't ignore the developments of the United States Air Force. It is still the reference for most world air forces. Allies look at it as a model, adversaries as a benchmark. So what is making me say that the United States Air Force is in trouble? Well, several reasons. Let's start with tactical aircraft. In 1990, for Desert Shield and Desert Storm, the United States Air Force alone deployed about 650 tactical aircraft, about 70% of a fleet of slightly less than 4,000 aircraft worldwide. Other overseas deployments remained covered, and there was plenty to spare. But that was the swan song. The end of the Cold War marked a progressive but inexorable reduction of the combat force. 35 years later, good Lord, it looks like yesterday to me. I was still at university when it happened. I was saying that 35 years later, there are about 1,900 tactical aircraft in service, one half of what it used to be. It is the lower level since the end of World War II. What is more concerning, though, it is the fact that the Air Force is decommissioning more aircraft than those that it will receive. And this is happening not just for the tactical aircraft, but for everything. The plan for 2025 is to decommission 250 aircraft and acquire 91 new ones, 60 of which tactical aircraft, that is 42 F-35s and 18 F-15EX. This is the plan for 2025, but the trend is not going to change in the next 5 years. Between 2024 and 2028, the Air Force will retire about 800 fighters, acquiring only 345. Safe changes of plan, but none is in sight. There are always ferocious political battles around these issues, and it is difficult to find one's way through the various media outlets and their political bias. This is the reason why, if you follow these events, you need a tool like Ground News, which is sponsoring this video. Ground News is a website and an app that gathers related articles from more than 50,000 sources around the world in one place, so you can compare how different outlets cover the same subject. Every story comes with a clear breakdown of the political bias, credibility, ownership, and then headlines of the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. One of the features that I find the most interesting in Ground News is the blind spot. If I click here, I am taken to a page that lists stories that are covered disproportionately from one side of the political divide. So if you consume media mostly from one of the sides, you risk missing important stories. For example, let's consider this story about easing rules on military raids and airstrikes. If we click in, we can see that this story has been covered by a decent amount of sources, 18 of them, of which 60% are leaning right and only 20% are leaning left. This is the kind of story that you will certainly miss if you don't use Ground News. Ground news is very important for my research since I try to be as factual and unbiased as I can about something that often is neither black nor white. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all the features. I think Ground News is doing a great job and I hope you'll check them out. Please support the people who support me. What we were describing before the break is called divest to invest. That is, save money, divesting older assets and use it to buy new ones. I don't know you, but when I sell you stuff online, I never got the price of the new. The logic behind this practice is that the funds that go into the sustainment of the aircraft, once the aircraft doesn't exist anymore, can be diverted to the acquisition of a new aircraft. However, it is quite clear that the ratio will not be 1-to-1 and some capabilities will be lost in the process. True, the new assets, despite being fewer, will bring some gobsmackingly dazzling wondrous capabilities to the plate when they will be acquired, commissions, the units organized, the personnel trained, and so on. But, in the meanwhile, capabilities are lost without a direct replacement. You can make a case whether a smaller number of more effective aircraft will provide an end result better than more but less capable aircraft. The Air Force has no doubt, but I beg to have some. For almost 2 decades now, the Air Force was ready to sacrifice everything on the altar of the F-35. As I said many times, I have no doubts about the aircraft itself as a fighting machine, but the associated program and its costs are a mess. And at this stage, it is safe to say that they will always be. Divesting to buy more of these aircraft may not be the most cost-effective strategy. And the Air Force itself is starting to have doubts, as demonstrated by the continuous references to various light fighter concepts that the Air Force commanders periodically throw to the press and the politicians just to taste the water. And the problem is not limited to combat aircraft. For example, the extremely important fleet of AWACS today is reduced to only 16 operational E-3s. These are all over 42 years old and they are no longer technologically adequate. All of this while China has a fleet of about 60 modern radar aircraft in service. To be fair, the Navy has a fleet of about 80 E-2s that could potentially pick up some of this work, but the issue is blatantly clear. Wherever you look, the problem is the same. Another example, the bomber fleet is small and old. The youngest B-52 is 63 years old. I was using diapers when it was built, and I might well be using diapers when it will be retired in the future. The T-38 trainer first flew in 1959, while the T-7 is piling up delays over delays. And I could go on, but you got the point. Unfortunately, with dwindling numbers and technical obsolescence, inevitably comes another issue: readiness. It is quite intuitive how an older vehicle requires more maintenance than a new one. And the same is true for aircraft. Usually an aircraft has low availability rate when it is very young. The ground crews need to acquire experience, the logistic chains are being established, and the whole sustainment machine is starting up. Then the availability reaches a level which is more or less constant for a couple of decades when everything is running smoothly. All aircraft, though, reach an age when progressively more components reach the end of their useful lives. They will need to be replaced, adding more work to the already busy schedule of the ground crews and the depot. The readiness decreases as the airframe spends more time being repaired. The kiss of that is structural fatigue. The structural components, after taking years of punishment, start showing signs of reduced resilience and become prone to failure at loads lower than the design loads. Small cracks start forming, compromising the structural integrity. The aircraft could still fly, but it can maneuver aggressively, it can carry the full loads, and so on. This problem can indeed be reversed. The airframe can go back to 0 hours if the structural components are replaced. To do so, the aircraft needs to be almost completely disassembled and reassembled. It is a long and expensive process that keeps the airframe away from the flight line for many months or even years. No wonder that the readiness in this case plummets even further. The Air Force fleet is very old, and when it is not old, it is problematic. The F-35s are modern, obviously, however, their readiness is very low. We covered this subject already in a detailed video a few years ago. The problem is not the aircraft itself, it is a complex mix of contracts and bad logistic choices, but the problem persists. And the improvements are happening quite slowly. The F-22s start feeling the impact of the Middle Age. It was never an easy to maintain machine, mostly due to the stealth coating, but the first aircraft built are reaching that age when the readiness starts declining. The fleet of the F-16s is over 30 years old on average, that is in the middle of the decline. There are plans for updates, but it is not a young force in any way, shape or form. The problems are even worse with the F-15s, both the E and the old CDs. The F-15Es are more than 40 years old, so they are in that problematic age, but the F-15 CDs are geriatric, with some airframes barely airworthy and an abysmal readiness. The latest systematic data about readiness go back to 2023, and they are, well, concerning to say the least. Indicatively, you may want an 80% of the aircraft ready at any given time. This is a realistic goal for a well-managed middle-aged fleet. None of the Air Force aircraft reach 70%, with the F-16s being the best, followed by the A-10s. About a third of the F-15Cs are flyable at any given time, while the more modern F-32s and F-25s are just slightly above 50%. So the ever-reducing number of airframes is compounding with the low readiness to hamper the number of sorties that the United States Air Force could conceivably generate at any given time. It is quite clear to me that under the shiny veneer of world-leading technology, there are serious issues that undermine the United States Air Force overall capability to exert air power when needed. All of this while the Chinese have a new and evolving Air Force with modern aircraft more and more capable with each iteration. However, we are not done yet because all these issues cascade on a crucial area which is arguably even more important than the machine themselves: pilots and maintainers. But we're covering this in a separate video which may or may not be appearing beside me now. Thank you very much for watching the video so far. An enormous thank you to all those who support the channel financially on Patreon or by any other means. And if you can't support the channel financially, that's perfectly fine. Please subscribe, hit the bell, hit like, and so on. So this is it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.